Hey there, and welcome to the EQPU podcast, where our heart is to equip you to grow and to become all that God has created you to be. This is episode number 18, and we're in the studio. Of course, PJ is here with us. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
I don't know if do you like PJ,
I
Pastor
don't care.
John? I kind of call you a mix of both. I also call you Dad sometimes.
Yeah, it don't matter to me. Just don't call me late for dinner.
Oh, okay. That's a good one, man.
Like all my jokes, pretty lame.
Man. Well, no, I think not all of them are lame. It's nice to be able to laugh sometimes, even if it's not that funny. And it's good. It's good to be able to have things that make us laugh and smile and think about the things that we're thankful for, which is kind of what we're going to talk about. It's not Thanksgiving. It's not a Thanksgiving episode, but we are going to be talking about something that kind of has to do with Thanksgiving a little bit. I think all of us probably know, we're all aware. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to focus on or to think about the things that are frustrating in our lives.
I think it's easy. I mean, to say it's easier, I think it's easier to focus on the bad and the things that are going wrong. And, if we're going to talk about gratitude, we spend a lot of time around Thanksgiving to be thankful for all we have. But then Christmas comes and, you didn't get the gifts you want. So then the ungratefulness starts, and then the credit card bill comes if you happen to use a credit card, and then your tax. I mean, it snowballs.
Yeah. There's all kinds of things. Like
There's always something to be crabby about.
Yeah. We don't have to look far for it. And I think to your point about it being easier, it's like, I know I've heard people talk about the fact or the idea that you could get 100 compliments or 100 thank yous or something like that, and then you could get one negative comment, one thing that's really critical or really harsh towards you.
Yep.
And the one that's going to ring the loudest is the critical one or the harsh one.
It's interesting that them are the things that we think about, because even myself, sometimes I forget about the compliments or the kind gestures or the kind words, but I remember something maybe someone said a couple of years ago that kind of stung. And so that kind of speaks a lot to who, and what we, think about gratitude and being thankful. And
yeah, because it's easy to focus on these things that are negative. It's easy for us sometimes, if we're in a spot or a time in our life where things aren't going our way, it's really easy to think about how unhappy we are and how bad things are and how nothing is going our way. All of us, I think, probably know, like that grumpy old person that.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say it like that, is because how come that's the stereotype? How come we never talk about that grumpy teenager? Which, yes, I had teenagers, and at times they were grumpy, but we never talk about the grumpy child, the grumpy toddler, grumpy. It's always the grumpy old person, because you think about it. I don't know if you remember this, but a number of years ago, the movie Grumpy Old Men, I mean, it was about grumpy old men. As you get older, you just kind of get set in your ways, if that's the terminology, and you can appear to be grumpy. Mm-hmm. And so why is it with age? And maybe, the quick answer would be, maybe you failed over the years to continually remind yourself of the things that you need to be thankful for. Right.
Because I think it is a trained thing. Obviously, we also know, I know people who are older who are happy and not grumpy. Like it's possible, but to what you're saying too, it is kind of funny to think about that stereotype, because
if you do run across a grumpy person,
it's like, it's
9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be someone over 50.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying 50 is old, because I'm over 50, but I'm just saying it's going to be an older person.
Right. Like
that
nothing
tends to be grumpy.
Yeah. Nothing's ever good enough. Their food's not hot enough. The line didn't go fast enough. Yeah. It's just, and it's like, that's the thing. It's like, like we said, there's always something for us to look for. There's always something for us to be unhappy about. And the more we think about them, really the easier it is to continue to think about them, because it's like we're training ourselves like, hey, I'm looking for this. I see this. I see this. I see this. I see this. But there really is an antidote to this. There's something that can help us with this. There's something that I think really like, obviously God has designed, created, given us, instructed us in his word that can help us to, instead of training our minds and instead of constantly thinking about all the bad things, it helps us to keep the things that are good in front of us and helps us to see those things. It just, sometimes it might not be what we want to do, because sometimes we like to sit in our grumpiness a little bit, or we like to dwell on some of those things that we shouldn't dwell on. But the Bible talks a lot about this.
Yep, it does. It says the Greek word for gratitude, thanks or thanksgiving, is mentioned 72 times, 157, over 229 total. And even the phrase "give thanks" is over 35 times in the Psalms alone.
Yeah, that Greek word for gratitude is 157 times, and then thanks or thanksgiving is mentioned 72. Yeah. So between those two things, it's 229 times total.
So I'm going to just share a few thanks, gratitude from Psalm 9:1. It says, "I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds." And then Psalm 97 verse 12 says, "Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, and give thanks to his holy name." Psalm 106 verse 1, "O give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever." And then, Paul wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament, and a lot of his books, gratitude and thanksgiving is littered all over it. In Ephesians chapter 1 verse 16 says, "I do not cease to give thanks for you, remembering you in my prayers." And then in Ephesians 5:20, it says, "Giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." He tells us in Colossians chapter 1, verse 12, "Giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light." And then a little farther in Colossians 3, verse 17, "Whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to the God the Father through him." Now you can see, I just rattled off half a dozen or a little more verses.
And these are just a couple.
These are just a couple, but the theme of gratitude and thanksgiving and being grateful is all through the Bible. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like anything else that's littered through the Bible. It's probably a topic that we should probably spend some time on and think about and ask ourselves once in a while, am I a grateful person?
Right. And I think what's cool about this is if you think about like giving thanks, if you think about like this isn't something that's passive. It really is. It's an action.
It requires an action, because you have to make a conscious effort.
Right.
Because we tend to lean towards the negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that. And I think, in Psalm 9:1, it talks about giving thanks with his whole heart, but that it also says, "I will recount all your wonderful deeds." Like I'm gonna remember all the things, and we've got to bring those things to memory, which we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But like you said, it talks about gratitude. It talks about giving thanks a ton, because, like you said, it's obviously important. It's obviously something that when we do it, there's something that happens with it. And so my first question though is, again, this is something that gratitude really is talked about a lot in our culture and society today. It's a pretty trendy topic. I see people talk about like they've got their gratitude journals, and it's really something that is talked about a lot. So it's not something that a lot of people are unfamiliar with it, but I don't know that I think in some areas we're missing it a little bit.
Well, I don't know if it's completely understood what does it mean to be grateful?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to have a thankful heart?
Yeah.
It's just like someone does something for you, thank you. I mean, why? Because you were taught, well, I was raised that way, to be thankful, but are you really grateful for that?
Right. And so my first question really for us to kind of talk about and think about is why is it so important? Does it really matter that much? I mean, we see it talked about in the Bible a whole lot, but what is the big deal about gratitude? What is the big deal about living with a thankful heart, living with a grateful attitude? What's up with that?
Well, gratitude shifts your focus off of what isn't to what is. And I'll explain it a little farther like this. It's like if you're so bent on thinking that you're expecting or you're waiting for the next thing to go wrong, yeah, something's going to come along and there's going to be something that's wrong that's going to happen, something to be ticked off at or to be irritated by. It's kind of like this. Think about this. If you just bought a blue car, maybe a blue minivan. That's because I happen to own a blue. Yeah, not cool. But if you buy a blue minivan, when you're driving down the freeway or wherever you're driving, all of a sudden you start spotting other blue minivans because that's what you're accustomed to seeing. So when you look at life through a negative lens, you're always looking for something negative to talk about. It's the glass half full, half empty mentality. We sometimes we do really well at training ourselves to do this, but often the training is in the negative aspect. It's like, how many times have we said, what else could happen? Right. What more could happen? And, sometimes you can't control, what happens, but you can control how that thing affects your demeanor and your output.
Yeah. I mean, we're all, I think, familiar with the idea. I think it's called Murphy's Law. If anything bad is going to happen, it's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
We all have that just so deeply ingrained, I think, in our minds sometimes where it's just like, I mean, yeah, bad things might happen to us. Like there's bad things that are going to happen in all of our lives. But like you're saying, it's like, if that's what we're always looking for, then that's what we're going to see. And there's so many people today. I don't have any numbers off the top of my head, but there's so many people today that are struggling with, depression, with anxiety, with discontentment. They're unhappy, and they're looking for all these things to fill these. And it's not because they don't have what they need, right? Because most people, especially, if we're talking about in America, most people in America have the things that they need. There's some that certainly don't. But most people have a place to live.
Yeah, the basic necessities.
Food, water, all those things that they might need. So it's not about, oh, I don't have what I need. The problem is that they don't see what they do have.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, I was going to say they don't appreciate the things that they do have because maybe they take them for granted and they just assume, well, yeah, I'm supposed to have these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they take them for granted, and then they're looking at what they don't have. And it's, and it happens in comparison. It's like, I see that a lot when, how do I say this? In the younger generation, and I'm not picking on the younger generation, they talk about, sometimes your kids want to live at the level that your parents live at, but you have to understand your parents have worked for 20, 30, 40 years, and they've established, a savings and a bank account where they can live a little bit more fluid than someone who's 20 just starting out. And so it's like, well, I don't have 3 cars and whatever, but it's like, but you have a car,
right?
It's like it's and I don't, like I said, I'm not knocking young people because I was young once, and I looked at my parents and I'm like, well, they have this, they have that, and it's like I have this, and it's like, well, because I was young and starting out, and so it's like, too often we focus on what we don't have and we don't appreciate what we do have.
Yeah. And I think that I want to make sure that that hits home for those that are listening, that that comparison, that is I think people
we live
probably
in a comparison society.
Yeah. And people have probably heard this before, but the line that comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's so much of our problem is we're unhappy, we're frustrated, we feel like we're not where we want to be. And it's because we're constantly comparing, we're looking at other people. Like you said,
when we're littered with social media, we can compare ourselves to people who live on the other side of the state or the other side of the country. We'll never meet, we'll never know. But look at Joe. He's same age as me. He's a pastor and he's got all this stuff and does all this, and his church is this size. And it's like, hold it, that's what God's called Joe to do. Maybe that's not what God's called John to do.
Right.
And so I think there's more. I've said this, and I'll probably go to my grave say this. We have too much influence in our lives. We have too much information out there for us to look at, where comparison is a lot more accessible today than was when I was growing up.
Yeah, and it's dangerous because we do it without even thinking about it. Like you sit there and scroll, and all of a sudden it's like if you're not aware of it, like all of a sudden you realize like, oh, hey, like I'm feeling kind of jealous right now, or I'm feeling like it. This is kind of a weird word in this context, but like I'm feeling inferior, or I'm feeling like I'm not enough, or I'm feeling like I'm not doing a good enough job. And it's like, well, where's that coming from? It's not coming from an actual place of like God, speaking to you and challenging you to do more. It's coming from a place of, oh, I'm looking at somebody else and I don't have what they have, and so on. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's a huge part of it. It's like, if we want to live and be all that God has created us to be, then we have to root out comparison. We have to root out like these things that are really getting in the way of us living out how
ultimately they're distractions.
Right.
They're distractions. They distract you from what God wants to show you in your own life and what God's called you to do in your own life. Because if you're constantly comparing, you're not being able to focus on yourself and the things that you should be grateful for and the things that God's working on in your life.
Yeah. And I think, again, like we said, the idea of gratitude, the idea of being grateful is something that's not passive, it's active. We have to take action. We have to choose to engage in it. And that's why I think Paul wrote so much. That's why we see it so much in the Bible, talking about giving thanks, because it's something that we have to be constantly reminded to do. And so maybe something, I know we've still got more to talk about, but maybe a challenge for somebody that's listening is, hey, anytime you feel comparison starting to creep in, or you feel some of these things creep in, it's like, hey, why don't you take a second and start to thank God for the things that you do have, and exercise that gratitude. In the Bible, as we were preparing for this and thinking about it, I was reminded of Job, who he lost everything.
Yeah, he's an interesting character because he was a very wealthy man from the beginning. And in Job chapter 1, verse 20 and 22, after he lost everything, everything, and he even got boils, and he says, then Job arose and tore his robe, and that was common back then. That was a sign of mourning. Shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Now, you read that in our American context. You read that with my American mind, and I'm thinking, this dude, maybe he sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Because if this happened, you have to go back and read the story of Job. He lost his children. He lost his cattle. He lost his hired help. He lost everything except he even lost his health, everything except him and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And he lost everything. And it's like, so, and he has this ability to put it in perspective. Now, tearing his robe and shaving his head, that was a form, like I already said, it was a form of mourning. It was common. You put on sackcloth, you tear your robe. It was a form of mourning, but he has the audacity, and I'll say it like that, to worship God and be thankful. He realized he came into this world with nothing. And so he just assumed he's going to leave with nothing. So it's, hey, I broke even, kind of, so to speak. But we look at it from our Western mindset, or even from my mindset, is like, yeah, this is a bad day.
Yeah.
And it's like, how he must have been certifiably crazy to be able to do this, because we would, I think any of us, half of this stuff happened to us, and we probably would raise our fist to God and say, God, why me? Why this? Why that?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not what he did.
Yeah. And I think it's hard because we look at it and like you said, we can't imagine that response, but yeah, it's just, that's what it's not easy. It's hard. But that's what I think we want to work towards and strive towards, that, hey, regardless of what happens, like I'm going to praise God. So just thinking about like this idea or this thought of like, okay, why is this so important? If we just think about today, like we need gratitude in our lives because there's already enough people, there's already enough things, there's already enough things on social media that are trying to tell you that you don't have what you need, or that you need more, right? That you don't have enough, but it's simply not true.
Yeah.
And so someone might be thinking though, okay, I get it. Like it is important. And maybe they're starting to see that and understand that, but what's the solution to this? And I know you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but what's the solution to this? Is the solution to just like say thank you all the time, right? Is that all we need to do? Is just I am grateful. I practice gratitude all the time because anytime I go somewhere, I just say thank you. Is that all we need to do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not all, but I think that's a good start, but ask yourself why. Because how many times do we do something out of rote behavior or habit,
right?
And it loses its meaning.
Right. We all can say thank you.
Yeah, it's like, we teach our kids growing up, you say please and thank you. And so they do it, but does it really register to them why you do it? Why are you saying thankful? Saying thank you? It's like, if you just get in a habit of saying thank you all the time, it'd be kind of funny if someone said, well, why are you thanking me? I didn't do anything. Oh, I guess it's a hat. So it's like, why are you grateful?
It is really interesting. Like, as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking through some of those moments where you just say thank you instinctively, like it's automatic. And then I'm thinking about moments in our lives where somebody does something for you and you say the same words, you say thank you, but it means like you mean it. Like they did something that was just like, I can't believe that they would do this for me. And it's like the difference of those two things. And we can live with that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the difference of just saying thank you, going through the motions and saying thank you because someone did something that moved you, that impacted your heart, your attitude, your mind, your posture, all those things. It's like there's such a difference between those two things. And I know there's been times in my life where I felt that, and I'm trying to see if I can think of one, but there's not one coming to the top of my head. Well, even something as simple as, sometimes Stephanie will bring me like a coffee, or she'll bring me lunch, or she'll bring me a snack or something when I'm at work. That means a lot to me. I know that sounds like silly and little, but she does that. And I think about like, she could be doing something else. She could be taking care of this or doing that or something like that. But she took the time out of her day to do that for me. And so there's a difference between that and,
because what I was going to say is, as you mentioned, that is a lot of times we're not grateful because we don't think that we need to be grateful because we expect it. I think the hardest place to show gratitude is in the home with your family, whether it's your spouse or your kids or your parents, because there's almost a level of expectation there that, well, they're supposed to do these things. Well, yes and no, but even if they do them because they're supposed to, if you teach yourself to be grateful for what is done, it also will spill over into other areas of your life, and you'll be able to see when people are doing something for you or just doing something that benefits you, because sometimes people do things that maybe don't directly impact you, but they impact you in a way because they took care of what they were supposed to do, so it spills over and has an impact on you. So it's just don't expect things. It's like
One of my friends this week, we were talking about this, and they had brought up that same thought, like entitlement, like ruins our entitlement gets in the way of gratitude and really like ruins our happiness, because like you said, there's just expectation. And then when that expectation is not met, well, all of a sudden we're frustrated, we're angry, we're upset, and all those things. So it's, entitlement can so easily get in the way. And so obviously gratitude is less about saying thank you, which is obviously still important. It's more about the attitude and the posture of our heart. And so the solution, like we said, isn't just to say thank you. It's to look at the posture of your heart and to ask yourself, where is that at? So with that, then it's like, okay, well, what does it actually look like? What does it look like to live a life of gratitude? And we have kind of a list. This isn't a comprehensive list by any means. This is just something that we had thought about as we were preparing for this. And so I'm sure there's more that we could add to this, but these are a few things that came to our mind as we were preparing for this.
So when it comes to the question, what does gratitude look like? And we're going to come at it from the perspective that if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you've put your faith in Jesus, you're a Christian. The first thing that we said is like, take the time to remember what Christ has done for you. I think a lot of times we live from that standpoint, expectation, and the farther we get from the cross, the farther we get from the reality of what Christ has done. It's like, I tell people this often, it's like, sometimes you need to be reminded of where Christ has brought you from.
Right.
It's like, you may not be the person you once were, and you're not the person that you need to be, but you're farther along.
Yeah.
And so we need to be grateful for those certain things, because without his death and resurrection, his death on the cross and his resurrection, we're all doomed. We're the Bible makes it very clear that, we all fall short of the glory of God, and we're doomed to destined to die apart, separated from God. And because of his sacrifice, for each one of us, because he went to the cross willingly, that right there is enough to be grateful for. But I think sometimes the farther we get from the cross, the easier it is to forget what Christ has done for us.
Yeah, we were just talking about this in youth the other night. Colossians 3 talks about forgiving others, and you can do that like as you remember what you've been forgiven of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we cannot forget that. And that, when we remember that, and I think, sometimes we have to be careful. I know sometimes, as if you've been a Christian for a long time, it can be really easy to fall into this mindset or this attitude of like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Because you can, maybe you didn't have much of a past. Maybe you've always kind of grown up in church and you've always been a good person. And so you just think like, I'm good. I'm not really a bad person.
It goes back to what we said earlier in the episode. A lot of times, even as Christians, we do the comparison thing.
Mm-hmm.
We say,
right.
well, I'm not as bad as so-and-so.
Right.
And it's like, when we stand before Christ, he's not going to compare us to someone else.
Right.
He's going to ask us the question, what did you do?
Right.
How did you respond?
Yeah, because like, regardless of whatever you've done, if you're a person who's like grown up in church and you haven't really done anything that bad, or if you're a person who's like killed someone, like both of you, if you don't accept Jesus and you don't follow him and ask for forgiveness, you both have the same punishment. Both of you are going to live in eternity separated from God. And so it's like, we have to remember that. We can't allow ourselves to become like, or to get on our high horses, so to speak, and forget that. And it's like, when we really remember that, like when I really remember what God has done for me, how he's forgiven me, how he's saved me, how he's done all of that, like that alone, that is enough right there, like to live a life of gratitude, regardless of what's going on. And I think, we see that obviously with Job, like he was so rooted in his faith. He was so established in who God was and what he'd done in his life. It's like, that's enough. That in itself is enough.
So the second thing is, first you thank God for what he has done for you, and then recognize that all you have has been given to you by God. We don't deserve anything, yet God chooses to bless us and provide for us. And I understand some people say, well, I worked hard for this. Well, yeah, you did, but who gave you the ability to work?
Yeah.
Who strengthened your muscles? Who gave you, as we read in Job already, Job said, God, it is God who gives and it is God who takes away. He has the power of life and death in his hands. And if we can do certain things, if God gave you the mind to work in a field, in an environment where you can make money, yeah, you're doing the work, but who gifted you the talents and the resources to do those things?
Right.
And I think, and we have a better understanding that as a follower of Christ, as a Christian, because we know that our giftings and our talents come from Him.
Yeah.
But if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, I would just encourage you to realize that what you can do, the job that you do, the profession that you do, the gifts and talents that you use to earn that income, to buy that house, that boat, that shotgun, or whatever you have, God has gifted you with those talents. Yeah. Psalm 24, the first 2 verses says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For He has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers." Yeah, it all belongs to God, and He chooses to bless us with that which we have. And you know what? We have so much to be grateful for.
Right. And just remembering that too helps us, because again, like we said, it's so easy to have this mindset of being entitled, like, I deserve this, I've earned this. And it's like, hold on a second. We need to take a step back and say, man, like, God has blessed me with this. God has given this to me. God's given me the abilities to work for it. God has done all these things for me. So we need to be able to see that, and that will help us in this area of living a life of gratitude.
Yeah, and the third thing is to pray and thank God for all that He has blessed you with. And maybe if you are a type of personality that you're more focused on the negative than the positive, you might have to pause. And you might have to ask God, show me the things that I need to be grateful for. Show me the things that you have provided for me. And maybe, I know we talked about it, and there's nothing wrong with a journal. We're not saying that, but sometimes we get caught up in, well, I journaled it, but it doesn't really, hit here.
Right.
And so it's like, take some time and just ask God, what are some of the things that and then all of a sudden it comes to your memory, oh yeah, God did this. Because we're so fixated on the wrong, or well, God, I didn't get that promotion.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there was a reason. Because if you go back to the story of Job was a wealthy man before all his calamity hit him. And after the calamity, after a period of time, and I'm not saying because he worshiped God, but because his perspective was right, he worshiped God. God provided to Job with everything and then some.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but I think it happened because Job's perspective was right.
Yeah.
And so he was thankful for what he did have. He still had himself. He still had his life. He still had the breath in his lungs. And sometimes I think we're so bent on what we don't have that we miss out on the blessings that we do have.
Yeah, which is good. And that's the thing. It's like we've got to recognize them, but then we have to thank God. And my point about the journal wasn't so much to make fun of them, but it was just the fact that, like, this is something that I'm seeing people like talk about their gratitude journals, which is great. Like, it's great to live a life of gratitude and being thankful, but it's got to be rooted in something. And we have to recognize that, like, hey, I'm not grateful for these things because I've earned them. I'm grateful for them because God has given them to me. And even beyond just the material things, because that's where a lot of this is rooted in terms of what we see in culture and stuff. It's like, it's rooted in the material possessions. I'm grateful for all the things that I have materially, which is great. But it's even beyond that of, as followers of Jesus, like, we need to be grateful and remember what God has done for us in terms of salvation. And so we can't forget that. And I think that's the missing piece. And obviously, if you're somebody who hasn't given your life to Jesus, then obviously you're not going to be thankful for that. So,
and the last thing, and maybe if you're a person who tends to be maybe a glass half full guy, or half empty, negative perspective all the time, maybe ask God to change your heart. Because it's not just about saying thank you, but having an attitude of gratefulness.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with being grateful. Yes, there's going to be some days where you're like totally ticked off and you have no reason to be grateful, but there is reasons to be grateful if you really think about it. Even on your worst days, you know, it's like, and if you are, like we talked at the beginning, if you're one of those grumpy old people, maybe ask God, change my heart. I don't want to be a crusty old crabby man. It's like I want people to want to be around me. I want people to not run from me when they see me coming. I want to be able to embrace life and be thankful for the many blessings that I take for granted.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest fears. Not actual
that you're
fear.
going to be a grumpy old man.
Yeah, no, I just have had moments.
Think so.
No, I'm not like actually fearful. There's just been times where like I've had experiences and I'm just like, Lord, please help me not to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just the other day, just like a personal example for me, I was just kind of feeling frustrated and felt like there was a lot going on and just, so what I did was I kind of realized like I'd been in this place where I'd been just thinking about all the things that I had to do and all the things I needed to get done and all that. And it just kind of hit me like, dude, just like be thankful, like realize and recognize all that you have, not just materially, but like all that God has done, how he's changed my life, how he's blessed me for my family, like all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, I literally took, I didn't set a timer, but I was just like, I'm going to do this for as long as I see fit right now in this moment. And so for 30 minutes straight, I was just like thanking God for just thing after thing. Again, not just materially, but for who he is, for the things that he's done in my life, for salvation. Yes, for the things that he's blessed me with. And as I did this, like I was just really in awe of all that God has done and just how good he is.
Yeah.
And so as we get ready to wrap up, is there any other?
Well, I had this thought as you were talking. It's like, the older I get, I'm not saying I'm getting wiser, but one thing that I realized, when I encounter people who come across as that stereotype of a grumpy older person, rather than getting upset with them or telling them they have no right to be grumpy with me because I didn't do anything, a lot of times I approach it from the mindset, it's okay, what's going on in their life that's causing them to feel this way? Maybe their perspective is out of line. And I'm not saying you have to fix everything or you can do anything, but maybe your behavior towards them, your kindness towards them will help them see a different light and get past whatever is doing it. And just be kind. There's nothing wrong with being kind to somebody. There's been a couple times where I've encountered crabby people and my first fleshly instinct is to be crabby back because it's like, I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything to you, but the spirit of Christ who is in me kind of like counters that and says, no, show them grace and mercy. And I try to be kind back.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it diffuses the situation and it works out better. Does it change their perspective on everything? Probably not, but hopefully it gives them some hope that there's actually something out there to be grateful for. Yeah. So that's just came to me as we were talking about this, because it's easy to just label, it was a grumpy old person. Well, what can you do to help them, get past that? Maybe they just need someone to be kind to them.
Just go up to every single person that's crabby.
I'm not saying hunt them down. I'm just saying if you're, it's like if you're interacting with somebody and someone comes across crabby.
Just go up to them. Who crapped in your cornflakes? Oh. You remember that? I don't know why. Like people used to say that. Like
can we say that on the
elementary school?
No, that's
just go up
like who eats cornflakes anymore?
I don't know.
I grew up on cornflakes, like those 40-pound boxes you get at the wholesale market. Yeah. So
what's your deal?
What's your deal?
So, okay. So then the question as we wrap up, the question for those listening is, have you been feeling unhappy? Have you been thinking about the things that you don't have? Have you been frustrated about where you're at? And the solution to this is not to acquire those things that you're looking for.
Because a new cell phone's going to scratch. New cell phone's going to break.
Car's going to
scratch, get a dent. Yeah. So it's like new stuff will give you temporary happiness, but gratitude lasts forever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the solution. The solution is to live a life of gratitude and thanksgiving, to be able to say, thank you to God, not only for the things that he's provided for you materially, but also for who he is and for what he has done for you. Again, we can't forget what he has done for us. And so the antidote to unhappiness is gratitude. The antidote for discontentment is gratitude.
Well, and I would add to that, the antidote for comparison is gratitude.
Yeah,
it's like when you are thankful for the things that you have, you're less likely to compare yourself to others because you may be at a different place. And so it's like, that's fine.
Yeah. And if we're honest, if we really took some time, we all have things that we can be grateful for. Yep. And if you think that you don't, like we said, I know we've said this multiple times, but do not forget. And maybe you've never decided to follow Jesus. Maybe you're not even a follower of Jesus at this point. Maybe you've never surrendered your life to him. What you need to know and what you can't forget is that God sent his one and only son to come and live a perfect life, to die a death that we deserved, and then rise again 3 days later and ascend to the Father in heaven so that we could experience forgiveness of sins, so that we could walk in relationship with him, and so that we could be a new creation in him. Regardless of what's going on in our lives, this is reason enough to be thankful. And
like winning the spiritual lottery.
Yeah. And so if you think that you have nothing to be thankful for, that right there is more than enough to be grateful for.
And gratitude shifts our focus off of the things that we feel like we lack or don't have to the blessings that we do have.
Yeah. And so our challenge for you is to, again, if you're feeling, even if you're not feeling unhappy, but our challenge to you would be to live a life of gratitude. Thank God for who he is, for what he's done, for all that he's blessed you with, because it will change your life. You will experience more happiness, more contentment, more peace, more joy, all of those things.
Maybe ask yourself at least once a day, what am I going to be grateful for today? What's one thing I'm going to be grateful for today?
Yeah. Yeah. I think all of us could benefit from that. And building that habit, because like we said, this is an action.
It's a habit. It's like you said at the beginning, it's an action. You're going to have to choose every day. Gratitude, like a lot of other healthy things in our life, don't just happen because you want them to. They are a choice.
Yeah.
A daily choice.
Yeah. And as we close right here, I just want to read Psalm 9:1 again. It says, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds.
Yeah.
Like we said, we have so much to be thankful for. Yep. Living a life of gratitude. If we do it, if we practice it, if we make a habit of it, it will change our lives because we have so much to be thankful for. And so we want to thank you so much again for joining us on the EQPU podcast for episode 18, where our heart is to equip you to grow and to become all that God has created you to be. And if you found this episode to be helpful, if you know somebody who maybe has been unhappy or discontent or struggling, would you share this episode with them? Send it over. We hope that it'll be an encouragement to them. And if you haven't already, you can rate our show, subscribe, like it, do all those things so that we can help get the word out. Yeah. We don't do this for us. We do this so that we can be a blessing. And again, equip people to grow and to become all that God has created them to be. And so we appreciate your support, your help, and your encouragement. And we want to thank you again for joining us. And we cannot wait to see you again on the next episode.
Yep. Have a great day.